If you want to color grade your videos on CapCut like this or this, then today I'm going to show you step by step everything you need to know to color grade your videos on CapCut. So hit that subscribe button and let's begin. Let's begin by dropping a video on the timeline. And now in order to access the color grading, click on the video and from the top right, click on Adjust. This will now open up the color grading tools. At first, you have the basic options. Now, depending upon which version of the application you are using, you may find some AI tools, but that is not what this video is about. If you scroll down, you will see the Adjust section, where you can now find the color grading settings. You have the temperature, the tint, the saturation, and the lightness. Within lightness, there is the contrast, the exposure, highlight, shadow, whites, blacks, brilliance, and a whole lot more. Apart from the basic settings, you have the HSL, which stands for hue, saturation, and brightness or luminance. This will allow you to individually change the hue, saturation, and brightness of only the selected color within your video or picture. So for instance, if I select the red only, then this will only affect the red part of the video. The same goes for all of these 8 colors. You can do this for all of the 8 major colors within the HSL tool. Now let's understand each of the basic and the HSL tools. The first option we have is temp, which stands for temperature. By moving this slider, you can either make the temperature of the video warmer or colder. Judging by the colors, moving it to the left will make it colder, and moving it to the right will make it warmer. Next, we have the tint option, which is also called hue sometimes. Now, judging by the slider, you can either make your video appear more greenish or more purple. Now, while the hue or the tint section simply allows you to adjust the greenish or the purplish tones. If you go into the HSL section, you can manually adjust the hue or the tint for all of the 8 major color tones. Next up, we have the saturation. You can think of the saturation as the amount of color within your video. If you move it all the way to the left, then your video or picture loses all colors. And if you move it all the way to the right, then the amount of color is increased. So just remember, less saturation means less colorful, and more saturation means more colorful. This setting is used to make the video either more dull or more vibrant. Alright, so now that we know about temperature, tint or hue as well as saturation, we can go into the HSL tab to use the hue and saturation to achieve our desired colors. Let me first start with the red one. Now, the hue slider, as we already know, can manipulate your color tone. So right now, if you pay attention to the red shirt, if I move the hue to the left, it will make it more pinkish. And if I move it to the right, it will make it more orange. Now, the saturation tool will either make his red shirt look more colorful and vibrant or dull. Underneath, we have the brightness, which will either increase or decrease the brightness of the red color. Now, if you click on the orange tab, you will notice that within the hue, the leftmost side is the red one, and the rightmost side is the yellow, which is the next color within the 8 primary colors of the HSL section. So this means that whenever you increase or decrease the hue, the tone will shift more or less towards the 8 primary colors alongside it. So here, if I decrease the hue to the left side, then you can see the red shirt becomes more prominent. If I move it to the right, then the shirt now gets a more yellowish tone. Once again, the saturation slider will either make the orange tones more dull or vibrant. Next up is the yellow color. And as you can guess, when you slide the hue to the left, the yellow color tones within the video will turn to orange. And if you move it to the right, they will turn green, as it is the color that lies directly next to it. Now again, the saturation control will either make the yellow tones less colorful or more colorful. Now we have the green tone. And by now, you probably guessed the pattern already. If you move the hue to the left, the green colors in the video will turn more yellow. And if you move it to the right, it will turn more turquoise. As with the saturation, moving it to the left will make the green colors dull, and moving it to the right will make it pop out and more vibrant. Now, moving on to the blue color, the only blue object in this video is the sky and the short that the sky is wearing. If we move the hue to the left, the blue part will start to turn more green. And if you move it to the right, it will turn more turquoise. Same with the saturation. Decreasing it will take away the colors, and increasing it will add more. Now moving on to turquoise, this is the darker shade of blue. If you move it to the left, then the darker shade of blue will turn light, or closer to the lighter shade of blue. And if you move it to the right, it will turn more purple. Now, as you can see, the turquoise is also affecting the sky as it is closer in color to the previous shade of blue. You can increase or decrease the amount of blue color by using the saturation slider once again. Now we have the indigo, where moving it to the left will make it more turquoise, and moving it to the right will turn it pink. Now, since this video doesn't have any pink or indigo objects, messing around with the saturation or hue doesn't really show any changes. And there is no visible difference when moving the hue all the way left or right as well. Alright, now that we have the knowledge of all three tabs and the HSL tools, we can use this to color grade this video right now. Let's start with the red color. I want to make his shirt more vibrant and appear red. Now, if I move the hue slider to the right, the red will become more orange, which is something that I do not want. Let's try moving it a little bit to the left, and I can see a little more red increasing. Let me just set it right there and increase the saturation of the red color. And now suddenly, the player's shirt has become more vibrant compared to before. You can always uncheck and recheck this basic option to turn off and turn on to see the before and after effects. Let me also try moving the brightness a little bit to the left so that the shirt gets a darker shade of red. Make sure you also pay attention to other red objects within the background. Next up, let's go to the orange color. Now, since there is some amount of orange in the shirt, I can move the slider to the left so that the orange color turns into red. Now, as you can see, the shirt has become even more red than before. But keep in mind that it should not affect the other areas. For example, when I increase the red of the shirt, the trees in the background also start to turn red. So play around with the setting and find the most suitable spot. Now, when I increase the saturation a little bit, the orange color in the grass pops out, which is not something that I really desire. So I'm just going to slightly move the saturation down a little bit to a -5. I will also slightly lower the brightness to give the red color a more darker tone. Now let's move to yellow. And within this photograph, all the yellow tones can be moved to green so that the grass pops out more. Let's swipe the hue to the right. And now suddenly the field looks much more green and rich. However, swiping it all the way to the right will make it look kind of fake. So I'm going to slightly move it to around 50 because we still have the green color available to manipulate. Now I'm going to slightly increase the saturation as well to about 10. Next up, let's go to the green color. And now I'm going to slightly switch the hue towards bluish so that the grass looks even more rich. Let's increase the saturation a little bit. And now I'm going to turn down the brightness to reduce the exposure a little bit. Next up, we have the blue color, which I'm going to slightly move towards turquoise. The saturation could also do a little better, so I'm going to boost it all the way up. Moving the brightness doesn't really make sense within this context, so I'm going to leave it as it is. Now, by using the turquoise color, I'm going to try and make the sky a little more blue. If we swipe the hue to the left, then it gains a little more bluish color. So let's leave it a little bit to the left and increase the saturation. Now, going anywhere beyond this would start to make it look a little bit fake. And on top of that, the video doesn't really have much blue in it to play around with. Now, with the purple tone, let's try and move the hue to the left to see if any of the blue pops out. Since there is not much difference, I will be skipping the purple and the pink. Now let's check out the before and after results. Let's uncheck the basic option. And this is how the video looked before. As you can see, the grass doesn't really look much green, and overall the color is a bit dull. And this is the after results, where the details are popping out more. The grass looks rich and vibrant, and the details pop out even more. And that, my friends, is everything you need to know to color grade using HSL. Let's go back to the basic, and now you have the lightness section. First of all, there's the exposure, which is used to increase or decrease the brightness within your photographs or video. So if you move it to the left, your video will get darker, and if you move it to the right, it will make it much brighter. Decreasing the exposure will make your colors appear more dull, and if you move it to the right, your colors can appear more vibrant. Next up is the contrast. Now, this option will either make the colors in your video contrast from each other or try to blend in a little more. So if the contrast is lowered, then the difference between the bright and the dark part within the colors will decrease, making it blend in together. And if you increase the contrast, this will increase the difference between the bright and the dark part as well, making it much more prominent. As you can see, reducing the difference between the bright and dark part to its maximum has now made the sky much more visible. If you decrease the contrast, the colors will start to fade more. The difference in various colors will be less noticeable. And if you increase this, the different color tones and the various colors will be much more noticeable. So just remember that the higher the contrast is, the more noticeable the difference will be between the brightest and the darkest colors within your video. Next up, we have the highlight. This tab will affect the brightest parts of your video. So if you move it to the left, the brightest part will become more dark. And if you move it to the right, the brightest sections will become even more bright. Lowering the highlight will also give a darker undertone to your footage, and increasing it will make the brightest parts appear more colorful and vivid. Next up, we have the exact opposite, which is the shadow. This will affect the darkest parts of your video. So if you reduce the shadow, then the darkest parts of the video will become even more darker. And if you move it to the right, then the darkest sections will start to turn brighter. Now increasing the shadow can give your color tone more vibrance, and decreasing it will make it darker. Just remember that highlight and shadow are the exact opposite. With highlight, you manipulate the brightest parts, and with shadow, you manipulate the darkest parts. Next up, we have the illumination section that is broken down into whites, blacks, and brilliance. This is used to manipulate the overall brightness of your video. So if you increase the whites, then the brightness of the white part will be increased. And if you increase the blacks, then the brightness of the dark part will be increased. This functions pretty much the same as highlight and shadow, but it affects the overall picture and not just the bright and dark parts. With the Brilliance tab, you can increase or decrease the prominence of your color, so your colors can either pop out more brightly or become less prominent. Next up, we have the Effects section. Here, the first option is Sharpen. If you increase this all the way to 100, it will make the image more sharp and highlight the details, making them crisp and clear. If it is set at 0, then no such details will pop out, and the individual pixels will more or less blend in with each other. Here we can see that 0 sharpness makes everything blend in together, and increasing it makes each of the pixels pop out. Next up, we have the Clarity, which will either increase the distinction between the colors or decrease it. You can use this to make your colors pop out even more. Increasing the clarity will increase the contrast between the various colors without affecting the brightness too much. Next up, we have the Particles, which can add grain onto your video. When the particle is at 0%, you don't see any grains on the screen. But when you increase, this will increase the amount of grain on your footage. You can try increasing or decreasing the particles subtly to give it a more vintage or retro feel. Now we have the Fade slider, which is used to fade out your colors. If you increase the Fade slider, the colors will look more faded, as if it was a picture that was painted long ago. You can add the fade effect to make your video look more foggy and nostalgic. Finally, we have the Vignette, which can either add a shadow or highlight to the corners of your video. If you move it to the left, this will add a white highlight, and if you move it to the right, it will add a dark shadow around the corners. Okay, now that we have gone through everything within the Basic tab, we're going to color grade the same video by just using the Basic section. Let us disable all of the effects from HSL and reset everything to the default value. First, let's start with the temperature. I'm simply going to swipe it and slide it to both of the sides to see which one feels better. Now, by default, the video already has much more warmer tone, so when I move it around, the colors at the left side seem much better. I'm going to put it a little bit to the left. Also pay attention to the environment, which will allow you to decide which color tone would suit best. Next up, let's move to the tint. And if I move to the left, the green parts become a little more prominent, but so does the sky. So I'm not going to move it too much to the left, perhaps just around a -5. Moving on to saturation, I want to increase the color and make it more vivid. Let's slide it to the right, and now the green colors are popping out more. However, you don't want to overdo it, as it will seem too fake. Let's set it to a modest 15. And now let's go further down. Now within the lightness section, we have the exposure. With this, I can make the video darker or brighter. Now moving it to the left doesn't really seem like a good choice, and increasing the brightness too much will also make the colors lose distinction. So I'm going to simply put it at 4. For the contrast, I would prefer the colors to pop out individually. So I'm going to increase the contrast until it doesn't look as fake, but I want the colors to pop out more. You should play around the contrast and the exposure simultaneously to achieve a good balance for your desired lighting conditions. and the color intensity. Next up, we have the highlight, which will make the brightest parts of the video either more bright or dark. If I move it to the left, the brightest parts become more darker, and if I move it to the right, it becomes more brighter. For this particular scene, making it dark doesn't really make much sense, so I'm going to increase it slightly to around 13. Then we have the shadow, which, if you remember, is the exact opposite of highlight. This will make the darkest parts of your video either darker or brighter. Let's move it to the left first, and then check to the right. Now, for this particular situation, I prefer to go to the left, as it makes the color pop out a little bit and also removes some unnecessary lighting. Now let's go to the whites, blacks, and the brilliance. Increasing the whites will increase the overall brightness, and decreasing it will decrease the brightness. For this particular case, I'm going to increase it slightly, as doing so is giving the atmosphere a little more pleasant tone. Next up is the blacks, and for this particular case, I don't see any use for increasing or decreasing the blacks. Perhaps a -1 or 2 is a good balance. Next up with brilliance, I don't think I need any more lighting within this video, so I'm going to leave it as it is. Now we have the effects section. Now sharpening will make the details pop out more, so I'm going to increase the sharpness a little bit. It is recommended to do this very subtly, as going all the way to 100 will make it look artificial and fake. After playing around a little bit, I think a value of around 12 or 13 is good enough. Next up is the clarity. By increasing this, I can add details by increasing contrast between the layers. Just check by swiping it all the way to either end and try to find a good balance. For this case, something like a 29 or a 28 looks good enough. Next up is particles. This will add grain onto your footage. Make sure not to overdo it, as it doesn't really look that good. Now, particles are also more of a stylistic choice, so in most of the cases, it is completely fine if you leave it at 0. In case of fade, I'm not going to touch it as well, as this is simply going to dilute the color and make it more faded. And in case of vignette, it is not really a requirement for this video. Now that we're done with basic, we can move on to the HSL section and fine-tune our color even more. For any video, it is recommended that you first start with the basic and then move to the HSL section. And that, my friends, is how you can color grade on CapCut in under 10 minutes. Make sure to subscribe to our channel and like the video if you find it useful. Also ring that notification bell for more video editing tips and tutorials.